Wolfenstein Youngblood is an absolute catastrophe of a video game. It's the second worst game I've played this year after Anthem. Youngblood represents an astounding arc for a studio that resurrected a much-loved IP by offering a new spin that still paid homage to the core tenets of the franchise, who now go on to completely destroy that same franchise with a game that has absolutely no respect whatsoever for the source material and where every bit of innovation is fumbled in the execution. It is a tragedy. Now, before we begin, I'm going to make very clear that I played through this game solo. I did that for two reasons. Number one, I tried to play co-op with my brother, but it just didn't work. We troubleshooted it, we went through all the Bethesda.net garbage, we checked our Steam settings, we did everything right! But in the end, it didn't work, so we gave up and we played solo. This is already the first strike. The promised co-op just straight up didn't work, and trust me when I tell you, I wasn't the only one experiencing this. Number two, this game never told me I had to play co-op. A lot of people on Twitter or Reddit or whatever seem to think that anyone who played this game solo just didn't do their research, they're playing it wrong, it's their own fault, because clearly this was a co-op focused game, so don't buy it if you're gonna play co-op. This is the Steam store page for Wolfenstein Youngblood, and right here it makes very clear, play co-op or solo. Bethesda and Machine Games make very clear this is a product you should purchase if you are looking for a solo experience. There's also no consumer warnings saying like, hey guy, you should probably play this co-op since the solo mode isn't really a thing that we put any effort into. Going into this game, I assumed it was basically like every other co-op game ever made, which is to say that you can play it solo if you like, or you can play co-op if you like. It's up to you, both modes work fine. The reality is that playing this game solo is a fucking nightmare for so many reasons that I'll explain throughout this review. However, I want to be very clear that the co-op versus solo design choices are but a few of the many issues I have with this game. Had I played this game through with my brother, I still would have hated it for its incredibly bad writing and characters, its atrocious plot, its banal open world side quest design, its endlessly respawning enemies, its level gated content, its bullet sponge enemies, the absolutely awful armor versus ammo system, its horrendous checkpoint system, the fact that I cannot pause the game even when playing solo, and of course, the microtransactions. None of these things have anything to do with co-op versus solo. They stand on their own 2 feet as straight up terrible, regardless of how you choose to play the game. When I reviewed Rage 2, I was like, listen, this is pretty fun, it just hasn't got a lot of variety in it. It lacks a bit of personality, but it's fine. Rage 2 wasn't a great game, but it wasn't a terrible game either. It was just some mindless fun for a while and then you moved on. It was clearly trying to recapture the core of what made the first Rage enjoyable to some people, while also taking it to some new directions to, capture a new audience. Wolfenstein Youngblood feels like what you'd make if you were trying to piss off and alienate your existing fan base. It asks, what would Wolfenstein fans hate? And then it does that exact thing. And perhaps the perfect place to start when talking about all of this is the writing. Alright, let's watch a quick scene from the new Colossus.
Not that I don't trust you, Blazkowicz. There's nothing saying you couldn't be wearing a mask made to look like William J. Blazkowicz to hide your alien space lizard facial traits. So, how many of the password Grace gave you?
She didn't give me one.
Right. Off with the mask. Show me your lizard face, motherfucker.
Super special, lower your weapon before I break your arm and put your lights out.
I knew it was you, Terror Billy. I was just fucking with you. Come on, follow me.
Okay, so people had problems with the new Colossus as a video game, but most people were pretty sold on the writing and the presentation. People felt that there was perhaps too much of it, but when those scenes were rolling, they were riveting. Great characters, great dialogue, great sense of tension, great stuff. Now, let's take a look at your average scene from Wolfenstein Youngbloods.
Who's this? Codename Blackbird. Paris Catacombs.
There you have it. That's your lead. He's in Paris.
You know, if we say something, they aren't gonna do jack shit.
Well, I guess it's just up to us then.
I say, what time is it? I think it's time for Arthur and Kenneth to balustrate this sticky wicket.
Fuck yeah! You guys are weird.
Youngbloods does away with that pesky, boring, one-dimensional BJ Blazkowicz and introduces the protagonist that true fans have been calling out for, his daughters. First seen here in this scene. and now full-grown teenage girls. For reasons unknown and completely unexplained throughout the entire story, Daddy BJ has gone missing, and so his daughters take it upon themselves to track him down and rescue him. So the first thing you need to know about the Blazkowicz daughters, Jess and Soph, is that they are sisters, and that means you can expect the sort of quality sibling banter that anyone with a brother or sister is all too familiar with. Stuff like this.
Ready for this, Kenneth?
More ready than you are, Arthur.
Zip it. Shit for Brian's.
Make me. Barf bag.
It also means that whenever there's a loading screen, we get to see how these two lovable heroines pass the time. Stuff like this. Oh wait, I think you guys get to see one of the awesome elevator loading screens now, okay? Get ready. If we see it and you guys get to see the awesome elevator loading screens, let's do it. Get ready. Oh man, siblings, man, I tell you what, you can tell how close they are. Now look, as someone who literally makes his living from sibling banter, the dialogue between these two siblings is so bad that I can only arrive at one conclusion. The people who wrote these characters had no siblings of their own and were probably raised in some sort of prepper bunker. I mean, holy shit, there is no way that two siblings would ever talk to each other like this.
What if Daddy's hurt? Bleeding somewhere?
We can do this. We can find him.
Are you kidding me? We got this shit, sis.
Fucking A.
But when these two aren't laying down hilarious smack talk, they're giving each other more positive reinforcement than a self-help guru at a real estate convention.
You can do this, dude!
I know. I just want you to know. Love you, sis.
Love you too, Jess!
These two just spam this cringy shit at each other the entire time, and it just bores away at your brain like some sort of jackhammer cringe hammer. I've seen some commentary that these two are actually the highlight of the game, that they steal the show and they're so lovable, and that hopefully we get to see more games with these two as the lead characters. No, just no. And I don't care that they're women, by the way. It's got nothing to do with that. You could replace these two with whatever gender you like and I would still hate them because I couldn't handle how fake their interactions are, how cringe their dialogue is, and how repetitively it's spammed. A big reason that these characters are written the way that they are is because the game is set in the 1980s. Apparently, we get a very clear sense of this at the start when we hear the synthy 80s German pop music playing. Pretty cool song, actually. But after that, there's almost no commitment to this whole 1980s motif other than, hey, we have billboards advertising VHS cassettes. Pretty radical, huh? Honestly, if you walk around the world, you don't ever feel like you're in the 1980s. Does this look like the 1980s? Does this? This is a computer room. Does this look like the 80s? And other than those opening songs playing on boomboxes, there's almost no music in this game. If you're going to create a 1980s motif, then the music is probably gonna have to carry a fair amount of that, and it just doesn't here at all. I think the developers looked at Blood Dragon and Stranger Things, and they think, yeah, let's do that, the 1980s, that'll be cool. But then they realized that they'd have to create new art assets and new music to deliver on that vision, and so they gave up on that really quickly and instead tried to make the writing so over the top tubular that we couldn't help but feel immersed in the 1980s. No, it doesn't work, and it's one of the worst attempts to recreate the feeling of a historical period that I've seen to date. Finally, in the area of plot, it's so bad. It's just, so for 3 games now, Machine Games have been doing some really good, awesome world building, exploring what the world would be like if, Hitler won the war and what it would take to overthrow him from that position of power. In its defense, this game is a sort of spin-off-ish, so expectations are a bit different. But make no mistake, this game advances the core Wolfenstein timeline massively and has huge implications on world building, and none of it is good. I won't get into the specifics because of spoilers, but some of the reveals during the playthrough had my chat roaring with laughter because they were so bad. And this is forgetting basic narrative structure, like having an antagonist, because this game basically doesn't have one until the very end when suddenly it does. Look, long story short, if you're someone who's really been enjoying the new Wolfenstein universe and the characters within it, Youngblood offers you absolutely nothing except disappointment. So for characters, dialogue, world building, and tone, the game is just awful, but it gets even worse when we start talking about gameplay. To date, Wolfenstein games have been linear, level-based shooters. You load into a level, you run to the other end of it, killing Nazis along the way, you watch a cutscene, do the next level, and so on. Classic, story-based shooter design, and this has worked fine for the franchise, and in fact, it's actually worked brilliantly as a selling point since so many shooters are trying to embrace the sort of like repetitive open world design bullshit kind of stuff, right? So, what does Youngblood do? It embraces the boring, repetitive, open world bullshit design stuff. The opening mission of this game is the sort of linear mission we've come to expect, and there are about 3 or 4 other missions like that throughout the game. The rest of the game is set in this kind of overworld of the Parisian streets. You can travel to different points by way of a metro, and each location has certain landmarks, like a hospital or an archive or an armory or whatever. So, pretty much the only good thing I can say about this game is that it's very pretty. Like, it's a good looking game. Pristine summertime Parisian streets make for a strange but fitting background for the carnage that takes place on them. You're going to see plenty that is legitimately impressive from a technical standpoint, and it's clear that the artists have earned their pay. Same goes for performance. It ran absolutely butter smooth for me on max settings the entire time, so the technical aspects of this game are rock solid. The overall structure of the game is very similar to something like Far Cry. You've got a base of operations in the catacombs filled with NPCs who'll spout really pointless exposition, which essentially culminates in go and collect this thing or go and kill that guy. There are never any interesting moments in this space like in the previous game. Never any interesting exchanges. All of the NPCs here are just so lifeless, and all of the quests you get feel so phoned in. I honestly struggle to remember any of them because both the setup and their payoffs were almost non-existent. So, let's say we've spoken to all of the NPCs and our journal is now loaded up with side quests. Now we head to the metro map and teleport to a part of Paris. Let's say I have to kill a German engineer. Cool. So when I first made my way into Paris to begin working on these, I really imagined them to be sort of smaller missions like from the previous Wolfenstein games. You know, sort of scripted in unique locations, some effort put into them. But no, they literally just go from point A to point B on the map and either kill a bad guy or click a thing. There's no scripted events or cutscenes or flair. It's just that over and over again. I really didn't understand this until I completed one side quest in one location, went back to the catacombs to hand it in, got a new quest from a different NPC, which it turned out sent me back to the exact same location to do almost exactly the same thing that I just did. It was just straight up copy pasted. The only difference was some different lines of dialogue from the NPC at the start. So that already sucks, but it gets way worse when you realize how tiny Paris is. You can get around and do a complete loop of the city in almost no time, and given how many of these copy and pasted quests there are, you'll very quickly memorize these locations and just get really bored of them. This is where we introduce the issue of respawning enemies. Now, if you're gonna do a world like this and quest design like this, your enemies need to respawn. I get that. But the calibration of the respawn rate is absurd. Like, I'll clear a space of enemies, go into the next space to complete an objective, and by the time I head back through the previous area to get to the metro, it's already fully repopulated with enemies. What this does really quickly is disincentivize you from actually killing anything. It becomes far more efficient just to run through areas that you don't need to clear, rather than actually engaging in the combat loop. Because when you are clearing a space, you have this niggling thought in the back of your mind that there's just no point to doing this because the enemies will respawn in 5 minutes anyway. They've made a Wolfenstein game where the player is disincentivized to kill enemies, where the player feels it is pointless to actually shoot Nazis. That is an incredible achievement. The last thing I'll say about the world is that it introduces a fantastic concept that absolutely belongs in a Wolfenstein game: level gating. As you wander the streets of Paris, you might have occasion to wander into a higher level area. Naughty, naughty, you have not grinded enough boring side content to be allowed to play in those spaces. Here, the enemies are going to be skull level and will just instantly KO you as soon as look at you. What makes this even better is that while you're in Paris doing missions, you can be given side missions on the fly by way of a radio transmission. Doing these nets you bonus XP, so sure, why not? I can take a bit of a detour, right? Well, it turns out that these side missions haven't been calibrated to your level, which means that you can get a side mission at level 10 that leads you into a level 20 area, so it's essentially impossible to complete the side mission that you have just been given. nice. Listen, I'm all for innovation. I love it. It's what moves our industry forward. If this was actually well done with interesting quests given to you by interesting NPCs, with interesting events transpiring during those quests, with interesting outcomes at the end, if the world was bigger and more diverse, if the respawn rate was better tuned and the level gating bullshit removed, I might have been fine with all of this, but in combination, it's just a total train wreck. And again, no Wolfenstein fan would have asked for this, so why the hell would you build your entire game around it? The other rock on which this game is built is RPG. Now, if you've watched me for any length of time, you'll know that I'm a big fan of RPGs. I really enjoy these systems when they're done right. What I don't particularly like at the moment is the way that many games seem to be adopting these RPG-light mechanics and forcing them into games unnecessarily and badly. Like, Far Cry 5 didn't have any character levels or weapon rating systems or any of that bullshit, but Far Cry New Dawn did, and I didn't enjoy that because it just reduces my freedom in the Far Cry world, which I think is one of the main tenets of that franchise. And also because it was something that Ubisoft could monetize by allowing you to buy the highest level weapons with real world money, which is obviously fucking scummy. So, Youngblood goes a very similar route by building a number of RPG systems into the core of the game. First up is your player level. It goes up with XP, and the most useful thing it provides is bonus damage per level. So every new level, you get about 1.5% bonus damage, which means by level 34, you're dealing like an extra 50% damage or whatever, versus when you were level 1. So this is how enemy health scaling works as well, since if you go up against an enemy higher level than you, you'll do less damage than you should be doing, and you'll lose the ability to one-shot headshot any unarmored enemy. Like this. Second, these levels give you perk points. You can use these to buy bonus health and armor, which again is important in the context of enemy damage output, since their damage is calibrated to your intended level. You can also buy perks that increase your ammo pickup rate, your reserves, as well as new abilities like cloak or shoulder charge or whatever. Similarly, you'll earn silver currency throughout your playthrough, which can be spent on weapon mods. These do increase weapon damage, stability, magazine size, etc. If you combine certain brands of mods together, they provide like a set bonus, which is kind of nice, and it's actually pretty cheap to fully upgrade your weapons, so you'll be able to enjoy those upgrades sooner rather than later, which is nice. So all of this is okay. It generally works. It's generic, but it's fine. No real complaints here. There's been a lot of commentary that Wolfenstein is now a looter shooter, like Wolfenstein meets Borderlands or The Division or Destiny, but it's not like that because there's actually no loot game. There are no better guns to pick up off the ground. It's all about these RPG stats and these weapon mod unlocks, which have been present in many games for a very long time. Thing is, I kind of wish there was a loot game in this game, because if there was, it might allow me to circumvent what is absolutely one of the worst aspects of this game, the ammo and the armor system. The way this works is that the majority of enemies, and I mean like 70% of enemies, probably like 90% of enemies towards the end game, they have armor. The type and amount of armor they have is denoted by the white blocks of health above their head. The more white blocks, the more armor they have. On top of this, the shape of those white blocks denotes what type of ammo those enemies are weak against. There are two types of ammo. There's the little white squares, and then there's the slightly larger white squares. I shit you not. This is how the game tells you which weapon you should be using at any point in time. So imagine you're in a firefight and you've got Nazis everywhere and a giant robot dog over there, and then a new enemy appears out of nowhere, and the first thing you think is like, wait, is that a big white square? Is that a little white square? I think it's a little white square. Yep, okay, it's a little white square. All right, now which gun am I using? I've got the little white square. Right? Is that that's the big, no, that's the little white. Oh man, it's the little white square. Cool. Oh wait, maybe I should change where. This is what's going on in your fucking head the entire time you are playing this game. This is mind-blowingly bad design that just has so many flow-on impacts that completely destroy the rhythm of combat. First of all, if you want to get the player switching weapons, you've got to implement a system that is clearer than whatever the fuck this is. Like, you know how Destiny has its colored shield system for its enemies? It's immediately apparent what you should be doing in those moments, clear as day. Here it feels like you're constantly squinting at enemy health bars before checking which weapon you have equipped, because the system is just so unclear and so counterintuitive. Second, the way this system has been calibrated forces the player to switch weapons all the time because not using the right ammo type is heavily punished. The wrong ammo type does so little damage against armor. So when I see a new enemy appear with small white square armor, I switch to my small white square armor gun and start firing, and then a new enemy appears who needs the large white square bullets, and I have to switch to that gun to kill him. Then another small white square armor enemy appears and I switch back to the first weapon, only now I don't have any ammo in it because I didn't reload it before I switched guns last time. I just switched straight over to the other weapon. Now I'm just standing out there in the middle of a hallway doing nothing because I didn't memorize the fact that I didn't reload my weapon earlier. So not only do I need to memorize what armor is weak to what type of gun and what gun I'm currently using, but I also need to remember, did I reload my gun on my previous thing when I was switching back and forward between them, because the game forces you to do that all the time. Third problem with this system, ammo availability. Holy hell, you never have enough ammo for the guns you need. I'm being forced to use specific guns against specific enemies, but I'm just not being given enough ammo to sustain that. So I'm constantly forced to use the wrong ammo type, which is less efficient, which means I'm out of ammo on all my guns all the time. And it's such a shitty feeling as a player to know that you could be doing more damage, but you're not, simply because the game's ammo economy hasn't been calibrated correctly. Finally, and perhaps most stupidly, the system is so gamey and it produces such dumb outcomes for the player. Like, this is my shotgun when I dump it into the wrong armor type. It does fuck all. So here in this instance, what I should have used is my shitty pea shooter silenced sidearm. This crappy little handgun does more damage to this giant armored brute than my shotgun does because this crappy gamified RPG system makes it so. The shotgun in this game, by the way, it's the worst I've ever experienced. It's so bad. It's like a pillar. It's borderline pointless. So that system really guts the overall flow of combat. It becomes extremely frustrating to play Youngblood because you aren't floating around creating this whirlwind of destruction. You're instead worrying about all this gamey bullshit because the game has erected all of these barriers to you just having fun. It doesn't feel good to be constantly forced to switch weapons. It doesn't feel good to be constantly out of ammo. It just feels frustrating. There are some excellent weapon mechanics here, which we've obviously come to expect from the likes of machine games. They know how to make a good gun, okay? But all of those mechanics are utterly smothered by this awful RPG-esque design. So everything I've said is completely independent of the co-op aspects of the game. The story, the world design, the quest, the level gain, the progression system, the ammo bullshit, all of this is exactly the same if you play the game co-op or solo. Now, let's talk about the absolute clusterfuck that is playing this game solo with the AI companion. The first and most important thing to know about your AI companion is that they are completely useless, dumb as dog shit, and a massive liability to you that will get you killed way more often than will actually help you, but that you cannot turn it off and you cannot let it die. There are no options to lone wolf this game. The AI companion must be with you at all times. This game would be 1,000 times better if I had the option to disable this AI and go it alone, but alas, this isn't possible. Perhaps the first sign this bot sucks is when you try and be stealthy. Good news, your AI companion isn't like Ellie in The Last of Us. This one can and very often will break your stealth by getting spotted. The enemy AI can spot your AI buddy, which is great because your AI buddy makes almost no effort to hide. I actually gave up on stealth play about halfway through my playthrough for this specific reason. There's no point because more often than not, your AI companion will fuck it up for you. Point 2, your AI companion does almost no damage in combat. I've seen them kill enemies like once or twice maybe, but generally they just fire off into the distance, like this. Had this bot been a useful fighting force, that might have made it somewhat useful. Instead, all they're really useful for is drawing fire on some occasions while you mop up enemies, and even this doesn't work most of the time since the enemy AI is actually programmed to prioritize you over the AI bot. So if you want to try and get behind enemies while your partner shoots and try and draws attention, this generally doesn't work. Now, their ability to take some damage and draw some fire sometimes is useful, except during boss fights, where it becomes a massive liability, because what they'll do is stand out in the middle of the boss area and just shoot at the boss. No cover, no anything, just standing there wailing on the boss. The boss, of course, will turn around and just KO your partner. Good, you think. Great, she's dead now. I can just leave her there and get on with the fight without her distracting me. Wrong. You need to resurrect her or you wipe. It's game over if you let her die. So when she gets downed, you then need to go and run out into the middle of the boss arena to try and res her up, which invariably leads to you also getting down most of the time, because who the fuck would run directly underneath a giant enemy robot, right? If you do get her up and manage to continue the fight, she will again stand up in the middle of the room and DPS the boss, meaning that she will again go down. I wiped on this boss twice. More on that later, and I only managed to beat it when I found a cheesy roof spot, because here I could stop the AI bot from running face first into the enemy. At that point, it was an easy kill. The real boss I had to overcome was my idiot teammate, not the giant Nazi robot in front of me. Truly incredible. Of all the possible ways I could think to implement an AI companion in a game, this is the worst. This is the absolute worst. I can't understand how in playtesting this wasn't discovered and fixed. It's so immediately apparent that, like, I don't know. I don't even know. Either way, don't play this game solo under any conditions. It's an absolute nightmare. Just one final point as well. When I wiped on this boss for the first time, here's what happened.
On the top of the tower.
Oh my god, are you serious?
Through the garage to the main lobby first, then you keep heading up.
Gotcha.
Okay, ladies. Make your way through Brother Two's garage and head up towards the roof.
Are you fucking kidding me?
I think there could be someone here. Stay on your toes.
Am I at the very start? I'm at the very start. Why would you do this? Like, why would you think this is good design? Like, why would you go, you know what we need to do? Have a boss where, like, the AI companion just fucking stands in the way the entire time, and then when they fail and die on the boss, they actually need to do the entire fucking mission again. Like, who would have thought that's a good idea? This is such a massive letdown, man. This is such a, like...
Okay, this must be the garage.
This is just such a huge letdown. I found out that when I wipe on a boss, I don't go back to the boss checkpoint. I go back to the very start of the level. The very beginning of that level. Like 30 minutes of work that I put into that level, clearing it, gone in an instant. No boss checkpoints in Wolfenstein Youngblood except for the final boss. Otherwise, if you die on a boss, you've got to do the whole level again. This meant that on the second time through, I just ran through everything because fuck it. And the fact that I could even do that, just run through a level not caring about it, just showed me how badly designed this game was in the first place. Alright, so let's wrap this up. First of all, microtransactions. Yes, the game has them. You can buy cosmetic skins for your characters and cosmetic weapon skins. You cannot buy any experience, perk points, or weapon mods, at least not yet. I say not yet because the Steam listing does make clear that you can purchase gear, pep signals, and consumables. It's unclear whether or not this is foreshadowing a change to the microtransaction economy in the future, but I'd put big money on yes, given that it's Bethesda we're talking about here, who just this week added a requirement to have a Bethesda.net account so you could play classic versions of Doom. And not 2 weeks ago, they added more pay-to-win style mechanics to Fallout 76 after swearing for months that they would never do that. Do not ever trust anything Bethesda says. These guys are as scummy as they come. Coming back to the point about consumables, you can in fact already buy consumables for things like bonus XP or bonus health on consoles, though for some reason you can't buy these on Steam. I think it's pretty gross that you can buy these things at all, but that's just me. Finally, can I just ask a simple question? Why do we need microtransactions in this game at all? In an early interview, the developer said that the playtime for Youngbloods was around 25 to 30 hours. That is an absolute lie. I basically finished this game in about 11 hours time. Now, I didn't do every side quest, obviously, but are you going to tell me there's an additional 19 hours of side quests running around this tiny map of Paris? No, there isn't. That's a lie. This game is about 10 hours long, maybe 15 if you do everything. So why does a 10 to 15 hour game need microtransactions at all? Why are developers wasting their time and effort with skins and boosters and multiple currencies and all this shit when they can't even get the fundamental design elements right? I never ever felt pressured to spend money in Wolfenstein Youngblood, but in every menu I was reminded that I could if I wanted to, and I could buy that handy little health booster or XP booster should I choose. And when it comes to a single player game, clocking in at around 10 hours, that just kind of grosses me out. Okay, final beat here, one last story to finish up. I want to finish with a story that I think really sums up just how bad this game is. It's about the last boss. So I get to the boss and it's one where he has like a jetpack and he's constantly following me around. I should be shooting him in his back, but it's really hard to do that when he's fixated on me instead of my AI buddy. So this phase just takes a really long time. It's an example of the way that this game is playable solo, and it's the option to play it solo, but it's not been intelligently designed to make solo play actually enjoyable. At some points, enemies appear and I need to take them down. Fine, off we go. Thing is, almost all of them are very heavily armored, and I just don't have enough of the right ammo types to bring them all down. So again, this phase takes longer than it should, as I'm forced to shoot enemies with the wrong ammo type. During this time, my AI companion is just standing out in the middle of the map, taking every bit of damage, and I constantly need to res her up. We get to the next phase where the boss is on the ground, and I eventually die because he's just doing so much damage to me. I look at the mission level I'm on, and I notice that it's a level 35 mission when I'm only level 33, so I'm essentially under-leveled for this content. Only I didn't really know that when I got there because I was just following the flow of the missions. I wasn't paying attention to any of this level gating bullshit. So I think, okay, fine, I'll go and grind some side missions, I guess. No, I won't, because as I looked in my menu, I learned that there was no way for me to exit this mission and to come back to it. I'd entered a mission that I was too low level for, and there was no way at all for me to exit it. And by the way, when I open my menu like that, I'm not pausing the game. There is no pause functionality in this game, even when playing solo. You cannot pause this fucking game at any point in time. So, I keep going and I die once or twice more, and the great thing about repeated boss attempts is that when you respawn, your ammo is not refilled. So I'm expelling ammo on my attempts and it's not being replenished when I die. I'm going into this encounter and it's getting progressively harder because I'm starting with almost no ammo each time. Finally, after much effort and cheese, I get the boss down really low, and I'm gonna kill him this attempt. I can feel it, it's gonna happen, right? And then I get downed, and it's the AI bot's job to res me up. She should res me every time I call for it by hitting the spacebar, only sometimes she won't. Sometimes she'll just stand there and bug out and do absolutely fucking nothing, which is exactly what happened on this attempt. Come on, don't do this thing where you bug out. No, come on. Please res me. Please res me. At this point, I was like, you know what? Fuck it, I'm out. I just played the final cringe-inducing cutscene for my stream on YouTube, and then I peaced out. I wasn't going to waste a second more of my time on this garbage. It's spectacularly bad, and it could not be further from all of the things that has made the Wolfenstein franchise one of the greatest franchises in video games history. What I find particularly fascinating about all of this is that Bethesda have in Doom the perfect case study for how to resurrect a franchise and breathe new life into it by connecting deeply with the core pillars of that franchise and aiming to deliver more of what true Doom fans would want. id Software reached into our childhood brains with Doom 2016 and made us feel like we were playing the original Doom for the first time. It was just magical. Now, name for me a single Wolfenstein fan who would have said, no, I don't want to play as BJ, I want to play as his cringe-inducing daughters as they complete boring kill quests in a repetitive, level-gated open world filled with bullet sponge enemies and shoehorned RPG mechanics. Find for me the Wolfenstein fan who would have said those words aloud. I bet you that you can't do it because I don't think that person exists. And yet Bethesda and Machine Games and sort of Arcane Studios greenlit this game with this direction and these design choices for reasons unknown, and the result is an absolute catastrophe. Avoid this game like the plague.